This is the fourth and the final part in our 4-part series looking at understanding the neurological examination. If you haven't gone through the first 3 parts, I highly recommend that you go back and watch part 1, part 2, and part 3, which form the foundation of what is going to be discussed in this final session. We now move on further in our localization, moving from talking about the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system in general, and going into specific nerve roots or specific dermatomes. So this makes your localization even more accurate. So when you're examining a patient, you're not just examining a whole limb, you're actually examining specific nerve roots in that limb, and that helps you to become very accurate when you're coming up with your conclusions on where the problem is. So I'll start with tendon reflexes, and I have got a simple way in which I remember the innervation for the key tendon reflexes. So I'll start off with drawing a stickman and labeling the nerve roots of specific tendon reflexes. So the easy ones to remember are the elbow reflex, so elbow flexion, which is innervated by nerve C5 and C6, and then the knee jerk reflex, which is your ankle extension, which is innervated by L3 and L4, and the ankle jerk, which is innervated by S1 and S2. So the way I remember this is I draw the stickman upside down, and then I start writing the numbers 1 up to 6 like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And you'll see it's very easy to remember that if you start from the bottom, working your way up, at least you remember these reflexes, and then it's going to be easy to add on the other reflexes that you might not remember easily. And I also use the same clues when I start talking about dermatomes, so I know that around the knee I expect to find the dermatome L3, and in the upper limbs I expect to find the dermatomes for C5 and C6. So dermatomes are another nightmare for students, and what I say is the only way to learn them is to look at them a lot of times. So paste this picture somewhere you look at every single day. That's the only way that it sticks. Having said that, there are some clues to some dermatomes which give you an easy place to start from. So for example, the inguinal area is T12A1, and the navel is T10. The nipple is T4. The outer area of your upper arm, where your deltoids are, is C5. The other easy one that I find easy to remember is your middle finger, which is C7. And from there, I can easily work my way round. So if C5 is out there, and if this is C7, then obviously the part in between is C7, and C8 has to be on the medial aspect of the lower part of the arm. Okay, I've got L3 here, which I still remember, and then I've got S1 down here. So maybe you can't absorb the whole image and all the dermatomes at once, but you can remember some key ones which give you a starting place. So I got this image from the book Neurology in Africa. It's from Prof. William Howlett, and it's actually a very good book and explains this in a very clear manner, and the book is available for free online if you just search for it. you'll find a PDF version of the book, and I highly encourage you to go through it. And then the last thing that I want to talk about in localization is the terminology that we use depending on what sort of deficit or what sort of weakness a patient comes in with. So if you've got a lesion high up in the brain, on one side of the brain, or let's say in the cortex, or like a stroke, the patient will present with a hemiplegia. So that's weakness on one side of the body. So the arm and leg on one side of the body are going to be affected. If you have a lesion high up in the spinal cord, okay, higher than your arms and legs, you're going to have weakness of both arms and both legs, and that's called a quadriplegia. If you get a cord lesion that's lower down, that is going to give you weakness of both legs, and also you also lose your sensory function below that lesion if it's a lesion that's cutting right across your cord, and that's called a paraplegia. You can sometimes get a lesion that just affects one limb. So for example, if you've got a brachial plexus injury, so just that limb where those nerve roots are going will have a problem, and that's called a monoplegia. Okay, rarely you can get problems that only affect one leg, and that's called a monoplegia as well, because it's just one limb that's affected. And you can also get lesions that just take out one specific nerve root, and the deficit that you're going to have is going to be very clear. So only that dermatome is going to be affected, and that is called a mononeuropathy. So this brings us to the end of our session, and I think if you've been listening throughout the session, you should be able to explain why we examine tone and what the deficits in tone tell us, what the deficits in power tell us, what the reflexes tell us, what the sensory modalities that we test for tell us as well. And I hope it makes it a lot easier to understand what goes on when you're doing the neurological exam. So I hope this was useful for you, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe so that you get a notification each time a new video goes up. And if you found this useful, please share this with your friends and ask them to subscribe. I'll see you in the next session.